Hello and welcome to the meditation conversation. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Timothy Stuetz. Stutz. Stutz?
Stutz.
Stutz. Okay, I had it right the first time, darn it. Okay. Timothy Stuetz. Timothy is a magical kids book creator, and he's written more children's stories than anyone alive. He has over 86 to date with more coming. He's a he's a certified self-esteem coach for children and the creator of Power Animal Frolics for Children, and a children's and family educator who has developed programs for the state of California and private foundations. He's also a master of ancient arts and sacred sciences, including multiple forms of meditation, qigong, tai chi, yoga, reiki, and quantum energetics, which he's been using to help thousands of people to leap over some of life's most difficult challenges to achieve their full potential. And before all of this, he was a certified public accountant, obviously. As most quantum energetic practitioners are. So, welcome, Timothy. It's such a joy to have you here today.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be with you, Kara.
So, it's amazing that you've created over 80 children's books. Actually, you're coming up to 90 children's books. And you started as a CPA. So, how did you cross over from this really practical field of accounting to a children's author and a quantum energetics practitioner?
Yes, there were several steps in between. I kind of knew when the CPA gig was was up. I really got an internal message that what I was doing, I needed to stop, and then I went back into it because of financial needs. And God showed me very quickly that that wasn't the avenue to take, as within 2 weeks of being back into that, I had a gun at my chest and
What?
being threatened. Yes, I took a job and literally within 2 weeks found out that the people that hired me and their accountants and attorneys were in collusion to embezzle about $9 million from people.
Oh my goodness.
So
Wow.
so anyway, that kind of gave me the message that I was not for that world anymore.
Yeah.
And at the time I had also started to meditate, and meditation also led me into Reiki. And so that was my transition.
Okay. And when about in your life was this? Like, how long were you an accountant before you started to transition?
Oh, about 5 to 6 years in various aspects of it.
Okay.
And I discovered Reiki literally because I was taking classes from this amazing psychologist that also tuned into our inner self. And he brought me a flyer one class and said, "You might like to take this class from this nurse." And she was teaching hands on healing. And she had discovered herself that when she was working with her patients seemed to get better than the other nurses because she did laying on of hands also, which is something
Wow.
that nurses, I mean, that's the history of nursing, is laying on of hands. So
Wow.
I took a class from her and she showed us various things. One was a technique to put your hands on people's heads and clear up headaches, and it worked. And that's the only thing I really used from her class. And at one point, I had a dream one night and I was standing next to this being and we were watching somebody lay on a massage table and there were a couple of people around the table. And this being standing next to me says, "You know how to do a healing with your hands that's not widely known right now." And it definitely wasn't known to me. So,
Wow.
not too long after that, I had a friend come to town and we went out to dinner and he said his back hurt. So I hadn't worked on backs. I'd only worked on heads, but we went up to his room after dinner and I asked him if I could put my hands on him, and he said yes. And I went into the restroom, and when I came out, he was laying down, and I expected him to be sitting in a chair. But I just went with the flow, and I put my hands on his back. And the moment I did, it's like the top of my head opened up, and a rush of energy just came down through the top of my head into my hands, and I'd never felt anything like that before. And so then I remembered that dream. And in the dream, I was shown that one person was holding the feet of the person on the table. So just because I saw it in the dream, I went down and held his feet. And again, that same energy went into the top of my head and through me and into him. And it was maybe 2 months after that, my body started to shut down. And I knew I needed some form of body work. So I started to look for massage therapists, and I'd never had a massage. I'm in my 30s. I've never had a massage in my life. And I wasn't going to get one either. Again, the universe conspired to make sure I didn't get a massage.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I had breakfast every once a week with a bunch of guys, and we had breakfast one morning, and one of my friends said that his wife took a Reiki class. And I asked him what that was, and he said, "I don't know, but it felt really good." And and she happened to be my yoga instructor. So I called her up and asked her what Reiki was, and she said she'd give me a demonstration, and she did. And it was the most I'd been meditating for a couple of years at that time, and it was the most profound, deep experience that I'd had of just feeling totally blissful and content. And first thing out of my mouth when I got off the table was, "I want to die like this." And I've
Mm.
been blessed to hold a dozen or so people at the time of their transition. And it really is a blessing to go out with somebody holding space for you.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I transitioned into the world of energy healing. And then again, just because of a dream and certain things that happened to me physically, I discovered Tai Chi and multiple forms of Qigong. And somewhere in there, I woke up one morning, and first thing out of my mouth when I looked at my partner was, "If Hershey's can make kisses, I can make chocolate French kisses." And so I set out on a mission to have a box designed and a custom made candy mold with a pair of lips and a tongue curled out, and found somebody to manufacture it for me who, when they saw how I had packaged everything, they upped the price 3 times to me because they saw it might be really successful. And that sort of forced me into opening my own chocolate shop and learning how to make candy. And it was in that chocolate shop that I got a box of teddy bears delivered to me one day that I did not order. And being a CPA and loving a mystery and loving Hardy Boy books when I was a child, I set out to find out who those bears belonged to. And I did discover, and like other things in my history where I found um, unlawful things taking place, um, found out those bears had been smuggled into the country. And anyway, the rightful owners left the bears with me. And I carried one of them in my car as a passenger. And after about 2 weeks of carrying this bear, I picked it up at a stoplight and said, "Who are you?" And this little bear said, "I'm Poet Bear," which made perfect sense to me because I wrote love poetry. I wrote philosophical poetry about things that were happening in modern day times. And so I packaged that little bear with the little book of my poetry. And the day I got it together, set it on the countertop in the candy store to sell, my mom looked at it and said, "Well, you blew it. That should have been a children's book." And I said, "Yes, Mom, but I don't write for children. That's all love poetry. That's all philosophy." So, anyway, somehow what she said planted a seed. And 6 months later, I found myself literally just writing a children's story that came out of the blue.
No kidding.
And then after that, they literally just kept coming.
So, what sort of time period are we in? You mentioned you're in your 30s, so at this time. So, I'm just curious in terms of you experiencing things like yoga, Reiki, um, Tai Chi, how far back are we going? Because these things are I mean, they're still they're not mainstream, but they're much more well known now. So how long ago is this?
Late late 1980s is when I started waking up to meditation. And
Mhm,
again, I never went I didn't go searching to write children's books. I didn't go searching to find Reiki. And I didn't go searching for a meditation path either. Um,
mhm,
that all came about when I took some Valium for a minor operation, and then that night took a pain pill. And as soon as I fell asleep, I was in a dream driving on a mountain road, going around a curve with a passenger. And I remember saying, I can't control it any longer. The next thing I know, my eyes are wide open. There's light coming out of my eyes, playing a movie on my ceiling, and I'm watching them carry our bodies away. The car didn't make it around the curve, and I crashed, and they were taking our bodies away. And I just thought this was pretty weird. So I closed my eyes and went back to sleep. And the next night, I took another pain pill and had a dream, opened my eyes, and this time coming out the wall across from my bed is a bearded man with an orange stocking cap and an orange shirt on. And he just kept coming in and out of the wall towards me. And I said, okay, this is sufficiently weird enough. I'm a certified public accountant. Um, and I closed my eyes, went back to sleep, and didn't take any more pain pills. And that was like God kind of awakening me slowly. And 9 months later, I found myself laying in bed crying for 3 days, did not get out of bed, did not eat, did not drink. And my whole life had fallen apart. And I sat there and at the end of the 3 days and just said, God, I've done everything I thought I should do ever since ever since I could remember. I got good grades. I graduated in the top of my class. I got a great job out into the world. I'm married. I have a child, had a child, and I've been praying. Now I lay me down to sleep ever since my mother taught me. And if you exist, I need to find you. And shortly after that, I got up out of bed, looked at a very skinny body in the mirror, and felt Christ behind me saying, I will remake your body in my image. And after that, I called up a friend in Hawaii who the last year when I finished auditing her company, she said, if you ever need a couch to crash on, give me a call. And I needed a couch to crash on. So I called her up and she said, well, I don't have a couch anymore. I bought a house so you can have your own room. And when I arrived, she gave me a book by Dick Sutphen, Past Lives, Future Loves. And I had never heard about past lives in my life. And she said, why don't you read this while I'm at work tomorrow? And I started reading it and I just started crying. And what I was reading was triggering memories, things that my daughter had tried to tell me. She was born in 1977 and brought some amazing experiences into my life and started me questioning things.
and how old was she when she started telling you things like this?
Um, Before she was born. I mean, literally, we picked out the first name Melanie, and I immediately went to look up what Melanie meant and saw that the root was darkness. And, it sounded like a beautiful name. It's like darkness? What the heck? And
Yeah.
I just immediately said to myself, no child of mine is going to have the first name of darkness without having light behind it. So picked the middle name Dawn for light. And darkness followed by light is also the meaning of guru, darkness followed by light. So she was teaching me unbeknownst to me before she was born, and the moment they separated her from her mom in the hospital, there was this red, orange, golden glow just emitting from her entire body and flowing up in a tunnel out the ceiling, and I'd never seen anything like that before. And I said,
Wow.
something far more profound than the birth of my daughter's taking place. And she has been my teacher ever since in many ways. I remember when she was about 2.5, she was in the back seat of the car and we were going somewhere, and she started to describe where we were going. And I'm sitting there driving the car saying, this is not possible. She's never been there. So I just started searching my memory banks and realized that the only time she had been there was when she was in the womb. And she
Hmm.
was describing it perfectly. So that got me questioning, when are we conscious? When do we start to know?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that was the start. That was the start of it, and it continued on afterwards.
That's incredible. Have you read the work of Ian Stevenson, Dr. Ian Stevenson,
No, I haven't.
or Dr. Jim Tucker? I think that's his name. They're out of the University of Virginia, but they've spent decades studying children's past life memories.
Ah,
And a lot of it is kind of in the, more Asian subcontinent sort of territory where this is more accepted culturally. There are some stories from the West, but much of it is coming more from like India, Thailand, Sri Lanka, that kind of area. But some really, really incredible accounts. I think you'd really enjoy diving into their work. It's because they have a very scientific approach as well. So
hmm.
they're very into the scientific method and trying to kind of tease out, like, how could this be? Is there any other explanation? Um, and sometimes they, find something, it could be this link, but the most logical explanation is that they're tapping into something outside of their physical being. But
Yeah.
that's
Do you
remarkable.
in reading their works? Do you remember them correlating anything with the birthing practices of those children in the Eastern countries versus those in the Western countries?
No, I haven't. I don't remember any tie
Uh,
to that.
okay, because I know for the most part, we so traumatize children when they're born that
Yeah.
a lot of that recognition that they're coming in with gets traumatized right out of them instantly. So I was
Yeah.
just wondering if they had looked at that aspect of it.
Not in the things that I've read that have been
Mm.
published, but very possibly in other work. I haven't really looked at their stuff for about probably 10 or more years. So, but there's a whole like paranormal kind of study branch of study at the University of Virginia. So they may have looked into things like that. I'm not sure. But that's really fascinating. So all of that with your daughter was happening, it sounds like maybe pre-awakening even.
Definitely pre-awakening. All of that was before I ever started meditating.
Okay. That's phenomenal. I mean, you really seem to be part of what I'm listening to Dolores Cannon book right now. I don't know if you've tapped into her at all. She's done a lot of quantum hypnosis, and she talks about different waves of volunteers who have come here to assist humanity and the planet. And
Mm.
you very much sound like a first wave, like helping to uh, kind of set the platform for, because, more and more, it's like more and more and more people can relate to what you're talking about, but you were really quite a pioneer considering the time that all of this was happening. I'm guessing it was kind of difficult to find a community or people who understood what was happening to you.
Um, Well, the communities I found were quite wonderful, but yeah, as far as the people that were in my life at the time that I started to experience these new things, quite a few of them fell away fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And my brother gave me the greatest compliment one day. He said, after I was meditating for about 6 years, he said, "You know what? I still don't believe in a thing you're doing, but you sure have become a much nicer person."
I love it. I love that
uh,
transformation, and it's interesting the validation we get from people who are not in the same place that we're at, who are much more mainstream, and there's a different perspective that has a lot of value too.
yes.
So let's talk about the power of children's books in terms of children and parents. So, what I know you mentioned the origin of your children's books, but what power have you found in this type of medium in helping children and parents?
Well, one of the things that I discovered was that our ability as humans to create internal images is one of the highest achievements we have. And our ability to create those images and our imagination is really the foundation on which our lives are built. So, children that have more creativity, more imagination, they resort to violence less, they succeed more. And Albert Ein- somebody once asked Albert Einstein, there was a mom whose child wanted to be a scientist. So she said, what should I do to help him?
Hmm.
And Albert Einstein said, read him fairy tales. If you want him to be brilliant, read him fairy tales. If you want him to be more brilliant, tell him even more fairy tales. And
Mm.
brilliance has nothing to do with what we choose to do. Brilliance is whether we're a brilliant athlete, a brilliant musician, or whatever. And what one of the things fairy tales do is they stimulate those internal images. And when I discovered that, I decided that the majority of my books would not have illustrations on the inside, that they would have beautiful outer covers, but I wanted the children to create their own internal images without seeing what an adult had determined should be on a page. Um,
Hmm.
and that also allows an interaction with the parents because the parents can ask the children, what are you seeing? What do these words mean? And so instead of just reading a story from cover to cover and looking at the pretty pictures, you can actually create dialogues and take your time going through the stories and create a bonding between the reader and the listener that is much stronger than if you're just looking at pictures and reading.
That's fascinating because it brings to mind the fact that the movie recreations of books are so often disappointing. Where you read the book first and then you watch the movie, and it's it's good. It might be good, but it's like
Uh-huh.
it never seems to be quite as good as reading it. And I wonder how much of that is just because of the limitations of the physical versus your imagination, which can go, in a lot more direction than once
Right.
it's
And
kind of grounded into that
yeah, as you're
physical.
saying that, I don't think our I don't think our brains, our minds are built to handle the fast, rapid input of movies. So as we're listening to a story, it gives our brains and our minds a chance to imagine. But when
Hmm.
we're exposed to a movie, everything's happening so fast and you just have to keep up with what's there. There's really
Hmm.
no time to create on yourself other than to get stimulated emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. It also brings to mind the role of the imagination outside of books. Like, for example, in meditation, It's one of the things that I often encourage my students is to use your imagination, because so often when we're meditating, things may float in, and then we shut it down because it's like, oh, that must be my imagination, or I'm losing focus, and I'm whatever it is. But we kind of try to fit what's happening in meditation inside the box of what our physical reality is, and we reject a lot of things that come through as imagination. And then we're saying, like, imagination is bad. I want to have a real experience in my meditation. But those lines are so blurred. Our imagination is this gateway that helps us to have these more expansive experiences. So I don't know if that triggers anything for you, but the role of the imagination is really powerful in a lot of aspects of our lives.
Yeah, it's like when in those deeper states of meditation, we can plant seeds
Mm-hmm.
and see things that we don't normally see with our conscious minds. So, it is a matter of learning to be aware of what might be coming in that really is guided versus what our own subconscious may be creating.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I get so many, without asking, I get so much information in meditation.
Yeah.
And I don't ask. I do not use my meditation periods to ask for anything. I
Mm.
literally just use them to connect with God and to enjoy. In fact, this morning, it's so funny. I've been meditating every day for over 40 years. And for 15 of those years, I meditated 4 hours a day.
Wow.
And I still get these aha moments. And so when I'm meditating today, it just, all I can say is it feels so delicious. It's like the most delicious experience running through my body. And I realized that I stopped appreciating it. It's like
Mm.
it's become common to me.
Yeah.
And so then I just started said, "Oh, wow." It's like I'm going to really move into these feelings, it's like, yeah, they're wonderful, but I'm going to really appreciate that they're so wonderful. And then
Yeah.
they just heightened even more. So,
Mm.
even after 40 some years of meditation, it's like it's wonderful to get these aha moments, and it's like, wow, it's just appreciating what I'm experiencing instead of looking at it as, oh, well, this is just normal. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned earlier, it's like I'm kind of like waiting for the next big
Mm.
explosion.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's so true. I mean, we do get used to these states, and they are special. It's a dichotomy, I guess. It's such a blessing for them to be normalized. But
yes.
then we kind of have to step back and realize the beauty of what that is. It's kind of like if you finally relieve suffering from yourself, like long-standing suffering that plagued you for years. And then that becomes normal again. You start to feel that equilibrium, but it just becomes normal. And so that stepping back to be like, wow, I'm out of suffering. It can be hard to step back and remember that and appreciate it.
Yeah, so that kind of this morning taught me, yeah, just keep appreciating every moment more and more, and exactly
Yeah.
what's happening in the moment, not just the blissfulness of meditation, but really what's happening in each moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So this has been beautiful and rich, and you've got such an amazing fullness of information and just of energy, and the transmission is really powerful. How can people find out more about you and connect with you?
My website is Timothy Stuetz, Stuetz.com. And if they go up into the menu item, there's a menu item called freebies, and I have a lot of wonderful free meditations. In fact, the most powerful meditations that I've experienced in my life are there as freebies.
Wow.
And there's a couple of fairy tales for children and some songs for children, a couple of Qigong practices that I have used every day since I discovered them. And that they will transform your life very simply and easily.
That's amazing. Wow.
I know. I remember one of the meditations I was taught by my first Tai Chi instructor. And he said he was walking in this, really old little bookshop in San Francisco area. And, one of these places you imagine with just books falling off the shelves everywhere and nothing dusted for decades.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said he walked by this one section and this book just jumped out at him. And it contained a meditation that Zen Master Hakuin had used to heal. He started out to heal a physical ailment that no doctor was able to cure. And it was suggested that he go visit this monk that lived in a cave. And so he went there and he was given this meditation that's, 4 Japanese cones, however you pronounce that. And
Mm.
so there's a refrain and 4 different lines, and you literally just lay down and repeat these lines.
Hmm.
And I did that every day for 6 months after I learned it. And then one night I decided, well, since this master became a fully realized being simply by repeating these lines, I'm going to stay awake all night until something magical happens. I'm just going to keep repeating these phrases over and over. And I don't know how many repetitions it took, but suddenly my body just filled up. Every cell was 1,000 suns, and I could hear things that were going on across the street. And it was so powerful. And every night, ever since then, I've only used that meditation when I need a really breakthrough, if I can't get through something. Because ever since I had that night, I fall asleep within 10 seconds of going to sleep at night.
Oh, really?
Yep, I just lay down and I'm gone. And literally, you could set off a bomb next to the bed, and I would not hear it for the first hour after I fall asleep.
Oh, wow.
So I know those things that I'm sharing work.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can only imagine the pathways that have been created through those experiences, the connections and within the body, within the brain and the nervous system, and the transformation, the long-term transformation that enables
It
is
does, and
incredible.
it's as you say that, I'm recalling when I learned sun gazing. It was I learned it from somebody who said you just gaze 10 seconds and add 10 seconds a day until you get to 44 minutes.
Oh,
And at about
and at certain times of day, I'm guessing.
1 hour after the sun rises and 1 hour before it sets is what's considered the safe zone.
Okay.
And he said you can only add 10 seconds if you actually get to see the sun without clouds. And so it took me a year to get to the full 44 minutes. But on 2 consecutive days at about the 33-minute mark, my body became a nuclear reactor the entire time I was sun gazing. I mean, that's all I can describe. And I knew the RNA, DNA, every aspect of my being was being transformed.
Wow.
And all I had to do was sit there and keep my eyes open and watch the sun.
Wow. That's
Uh,
amazing. I mean, what that does just generally, like looking at the sun or looking at a flame, I've found, but
mm,
how it affects your pineal gland and then, what you, it just seems to change and activate that pineal gland in a really amazing way.
it
And
does.
I mean, I know you had a stronger experience even than that, but that's incredible.
Oh no,
Wow.
I've flamed gaze, candle gazed many times in meditation, and it is just very, very magical. There is
Yeah.
something about the power of a flame, and I
Yeah.
was actually, at the time, right after I became a Reiki master, I was contemplating what the difference between Reiki initiations were and the initiations that enlightened beings gave their students, and happened to be at a meditation retreat shortly after that, and was in a temple, and I went in to meditate, and there's a statue, a Murti of Bhagwan Nityananda, which is a city yoga path. And when I went in, I was the only person in there meditating. And it was late afternoon, and at 5 o'clock every night they have a program. So I had been meditating for a couple of hours, and then I hear in my inner voice, when you open your eyes, there'll be somebody bowing before me, and there'll be people sitting on both sides of you. I mean, I was so deep in meditation, I had no idea the time had flown. So I opened my eyes, and yeah, the room was full. There was somebody bowing before this statue, and a flame went from his heart into their heart, and then went into every heart around the room.
Wow.
And as it did this, I heard every human heart is a flame of love burning to go home to God. Siddha Yoga fans the flame, Reiki fans the flame, etc., etc. So yeah, flames are dear to me, and I can tell they're dear to you too.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. This has been just really, really powerful. I mean, the words that you've said have been really powerful, but just in between the words and behind the words and through the
Mm.
words, it's, you know, so much more than what you're saying. You really have a true gift of transmitting that really strong vibration through your
Mm.
communication. So thank you so much. It's been really an honor and a joy to have you here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for recognizing that, and thank you for sharing that. And it's my pleasure to be with you. And may everyone just do one thing, just keep meditating. It
Well
opens up
said.
all kinds of worlds.
Well said. Beautiful.
Uh,
Thank you so much, Timothy.
you're welcome. Thank you.